Happy Memorial Day, Beaufort. This is your Memorial Day edition of the newscast. I'm joined today by our own friendly Mayor, Billy Keyserling. Billy, thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, Kevin. Memorial Day is a great time.
It sure is, and we have a couple things to talk about in this broadcast. We're going to do a full 10 minutes with you, Billy. We're going to do about 5 minutes talking about this amazing history we have here in Beaufort that I don't think enough people seem to know about yet. That's what Memorial Day started as, Beaufort.
I think you're right. I think a vast majority of the people think of Memorial Day as a day where we gather in the National Cemetery to honor those who've lost in service to their country. Mm-hmm. And it is that. Mm-hmm. But it goes back to just after the Civil War, when the black soldiers who were killed were planted in Charleston, buried in Charleston. And the children on this day used to get bundles of flowers and they used to go decorate the graves. Well, subsequent to that, the graves were moved from there and a number of other places into our Civil War, post-Civil War, Beaufort National Cemetery. Mm-hmm. And once that happened, then it came to Beaufort. And in Beaufort, it was probably the biggest African American and community celebration we knew.
So today we have the Water Festival. When you were a child, I imagine it was indeed the parade that was our biggest event.
Right, and it probably ties with the Gullah Festival, doing their event on Memorial Day in Beaufort. But when I was a child, you would go, and there was it was mostly an African American black event. Mm-hmm. And along when the parade came on Boundary Street across from the cemetery, there were vendors there were games to be played, there were families who had picnics laid out, and people all gathered to not just remember, but to actually actively celebrate with food and games and rides and family reunions. And so when you go to the National Cemetery, and you'll see, because people have asked me this, a larger number of African Americans, mm-hmm. it's because of the tradition that they've been doing this now for since the end of the Civil War.
Absolutely, and the struggle and the growth of our African Americans as citizens is really defined, I think, a lot by war. The movie Glory is one of my favorites, but it's important to understand the 54th Massachusetts, our first regiment of African descent, were freedmen. Those were men who were not freed slaves, except for Denzel, of course, in the movie. But these were people who were fighting with the glory of war. Before that, we had to have our black soldiers be chefs and be cooks and be people to clean the bathrooms. They got the glory of war when they fought at Fort Wagner in Charleston, and we still honor that.
In fact, the Massachusetts 54th, in about 1985, I believe it was, maybe 86, those who were deceased, who were killed during the war, were brought from Charleston, and there was a reenactment. Much of the cast and equipment, I think, from Glory was used. The governor of Massachusetts was here, and it's probably the biggest, most Hollywood-like Memorial Day parade we had, because we had people from all over the country coming, because it was
a big deal. It was about 14 soldiers we found.
The movie popularized it. But it was an incredible parade. I remember that so clearly. It was right after I had moved back to Beaufort.
You lived a few years in Boston, my hometown.
That's right. And it was, it almost was like the early days. Mm-hmm. But it was much more staged. Now, you'll still find, if you go through certain neighborhoods, you'll see smoke coming up from the backyards where people are barbecuing. Wow. There's a business in Beaufort now that has a very, very large barbecue where they feed the whole neighborhood. Hundreds and hundreds of people go to that barbecue. So I think we need to just continue to do events. There was an event recently in Beaufort with Vietnam women who had served in Vietnam, a play about women who had served in Vietnam, and you saw black and white together. Mm-hmm. You see women now part of the progress. At that time, they of course couldn't get anywhere near combat, so they were all nurses. Right. But I think we just need to take the time to stop and think. And what I said the other day in a talk is, have a great time. Go out on the water, do your family barbecue, whatever you want to do, but take just a few minutes to think about the men and women over the course of the history of this country who have died so that we can have what we have today. And then appreciate what we have today. Let's get rid of some of this bitterness. Let's get rid of some of this finger pointing. Let's get on the same page. And let's work for a better country, for a better state, and in my case, for a better city.
Billy, always a pleasure speaking with you. We're going to take the second half of this show and we're going to do a couple on-location packages for people, but we're also going to check out these dancers from Sierra Leone. You've brought them here, and these are people that, my understanding is they were victims of machete warfare, but they're so joyful and they promote world peace by playing soccer. Billy Kay, it's always great talking with you. We'll get to learn a little bit more when we come back from this commercial break, so stay there. Tell me about this. What's going on today?
Well, I got a phone call last week from a woman who runs an organization that is sponsoring them coming here. And they're called SLASA, Single Leg Amputee Soccer Association. And they're a group of men and women who have come together and used soccer as a vehicle for taking their words of nonviolence and peace. There's been a lot of violence in their country.
My understanding is they're representative of their people. 1 out of 10 people has a traumatic injury from machete, if I'm not mistaken.
Because they've had their own revolutions. Many of these are victims of the blood wars. You know, they are saying we're above that. And so they're basically out as ambassadors in their country, forming leagues, playing different regions against each other. And I think the symbolism of amputees learning how to play soccer.
Not just playing, achieving. I am not as talented as the people I'm seeing here.
It's remarkable. I offered it on my newsletter last week, a 30-minute video where they train. And it's fascinating because they don't train. When they train, they don't use their crutches. They go on one leg. And clearly because that one leg is their power. There's no power from the crutch. The crutch is for balancing. Right. But these guys can kick that ball way better than most soccer players I've ever seen. And the joy and the happiness and the hustle and the excitement and the teamwork is a lesson for all of us. You know, some days we're down and we're blue and we think we got a tough time. Well, think what these young people have been through. They've been through revolutions, they've been through a point where people cut their limbs off. But what are they doing? They're traveling in their country. They're here. They're going to perform at the Gullah Festival this weekend. And so when I got a call from the woman who's sponsoring them saying, would the mayor be happy to be willing to write a proclamation, I said, let's do something a little more. I mean, these guys are coming that far away. And Gullah Festival is a wonderful event, and I encourage everybody to be there. But I said, let's take them to Penn Center, because the African-American population on St. Helena has a very unique relationship with people from Sierra Leone.
Tell me about that.
Many years ago, the president of Sierra Leone decided that he was going to follow the passage of the slave ships. Now, I have to go back to then, because in the 1600s, 1700s, a large portion of Sierra Leone were slaves. And so many who came here as slaves had been slaves. Right. And they were just sold into slavery.
From even different regions, I imagine.
From different regions. But he found that, you know, his compass brought him to St. Helena in the South Carolina Low Country. And when you began to listen to the Creole, the language they speak in the Gullah that's spoken here, when you look at the kinds of foods they eat and the way they prepare them, it's similar to here. When you look at the basketry and the weaving, when you look at the movement, when you look at the song, there's so many similarities. So after the president visited, Emery Campbell, who will be speaking to the group today, put together a delegation that paid a return visit. And they went to Sierra Leone and they saw for themselves the similarities in the culture and the traditions of the people there, which had been brought here. And so ever since then, there's been a special relationship.
When you talk about the remnants of the culture here, of Africa, here in the Low Country, it's just what you're talking about. The beat is here. You can feel it.
You can feel the beat. You can feel the beat.